Well, I mean to say that you can reach people and still stay at home. You don't have to travel. And I think really with International, it's my hopes and aspirations in a very positive way are all wrapped up lyrically in this album, you know, with tracks like Turn on the Lights and what International itself, Pastime Paradise. And it's a way of being able to detach and look at the state of social issues and really try and understand and not point the finger at anyone in particular, because 3 point back, you know.
Yeah.
So, as I say, it's not as intensely personal as Wild and Lonely, and you know, I've moved on from there, and I would say that International is a play on words, you know, definitely.
Right. Mentioning Wild and Lonely there, when I first heard the International album,
sure,
felt it was a bit like a follow-on from Strasbourg Square. It had that kind of feel to it, as opposed to Fever or Fire to Ice.
Mm-hmm. Well, I personally don't think it has that. Although saying that, I mean, it was Strasbourg, of course, is in Europe, and I was working with European musicians. But really, with Wild and Lonely, it was very much recorded on the rebound of the Glamour Chase, and that was quickly done in London, and it really wasn't the right setup for me to develop the tracks the way that I wanted to. Now, there's 2 or 3 ways that you can do it. With Wild and Lonely, really that album should have been played first to get the best out of the tracks. We should have played them live, etc. But it was quite a rushed affair, and saying that, it's quite an immediate album, and in some ways it allowed a certain listener to be involved with associate tracks that normally would have found it a bit too off the wall, you know. So in some ways it was quite accessible, and in a way too, looking at that, you know, it's a challenge for me to write in an accessible way, because I'm much more comfortable in left field areas when I'm sort of dealing in abstracts and textures and atmospheres, rather than saying this is it and
here's the verse and the chorus and
exactly,
another chorus.
Yeah, then stating the obvious.
Right. When did you decide then that this was going to be a Billy MacKenzie album and not an Associates album?
Well, really, sort of just a certain amount of the public were confused about the Associates, and they're saying, well, who was the Associates, you know? And really there was only ever an honorary associate, which of course was Alan Rankin, because we did forge and develop a sound together. And then after that, you know, I tried to keep things as democratic as possible, but then you find out that it doesn't always work out like that. And also technically, with this being a Billy MacKenzie album, the musicians that I was working with in Berlin, they had their own bands, so I couldn't really call them the Associates when they were Marathon and Sun Electric and Dietz Vai and all these other sort of German underground groups. You know, I couldn't really say, oh, this is the Associates, because they're not, of course. They're you know, that's like Susie and the Banshees saying they're Susie and the Banshees when they're they're from Nirvana.
Mm-hmm.
You know.
Yeah.
So there was that, and I personally wanted to change, and it made it a bit more focused, you know. I really, and also, I mean, the Associates really were the listeners, you know, the people that bought the records. They were the Associates.
Associate members of the Associates.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
International, to me, I've been listening to it quite a lot and thoroughly enjoying it, I have to say. It feels like it could almost be one continuous piece of music rather than 10 separate album tracks. But you'd said to me earlier that wasn't the order that you wanted the tracks to go into.
Sure, well, there was a certain amount of compromise. And, I mean, the current state of affairs, really things are quite difficult out there for artists at the moment, you know. And there is a certain amount of compromise, although with myself I've been able to get off with so much And a lot of that is just absolute front, you know. I'll go in and say no to a record company, and not being egotistical about it, but you've got to put a certain price on your head, and you've got to have a certain, and that comes from faith and enjoyment of music for me, because I'm first and foremost, okay, I'm an artist, so they say, but the main thing is that I'm a music lover, and if I really get excited by a piece of music, it is as a music lover, not as a career move, and I'll fight because I believe in that piece of music.
You haven't gone for what I think are the obvious tracks for singles, the most commercial ones for singles. We'll play the current single just now, and you can tell me a bit of the story behind the choice of singles. This is Colours Will Come. Current single from Billy McKenzie's Outer National album. That's Colours Will Come. More music and chat from Billy McKenzie and the album Outer National in just a tick. You're listening to the Sound of the Times, previewing Billy McKenzie's new album, Outer National. Billy's here, and we've just been listening to the current single, Colours Will Come. The album is a grower, and the single, Colours Will Come, will also be a grower, but it's not the most obvious track I would have thought for a single. Is this Billy McKenzie standing up to the record company saying, no, I don't want an obvious single?
Well, with Colours Will Come, it's one of my personal favourites on the album. It's a terrific album track, but it was, being honest about it, it was a compromise. But saying that, I feel it's a quality piece of music, and if people get to hear it, that's fine. And the main reason for doing music is, as I say, the love of it, and the sales figures always come as secondary. But being realistic about it, it's a business. But the funny thing is that as an artist, I sell more records now than I ever have, regardless that it goes top 50. And even like with the last album, that sold more than Sulk, that spawned 4 hit singles. As an artist, though, that to me has a price. You know, I would prefer to have my freedom and singles out at the time when I wanted them out, rather than go in front of a panel. You know, it's the same with American movies. They'll show rough cuts to an audience, and then the audience will say whether they like it after the first 15 seconds, and there's no real room for spontaneity there, you know.
No.
And it's basically it's saying that you will like this by poll. In the old days, myself and Alan Rankin, whatever scallywags we were able to get one night, we would hijack a studio, go in, say we were going to pay the studio, and then the next day get the money from a record company to pay for the studio. Then we would go to another record company, sell that record, pay back the studio, and have 15,000 copies sold within 2 weeks. And it was really, really exciting because the turnover was there, and you weren't sitting about waiting for 2 or 3 people to decide, you know, the fate of your work. And you know, but when people have a hold over you like that, as I say, I would prefer to have freedom as an artist rather than be dictated to. But it's important for, especially for Scottish musicians, to still see people like me doing reasonably well out there, because, you know, it encourages others, and hopefully, I would say, it would encourage others, seeing that I'm not from the right side of Dundee and I didn't go to university. It's saying that somebody from, you know, a working class background can hold their own, you know, against all these Etonians down there.
Quite right, quite right.